Welcome to the Financial Architects Podcast. I am your host, Evan Makovsky, and he's the only guest on this podcast month after month, and that is Chief Investment Officer and Partner at Financial Architects, Larry Steinberg. Larry, to say a lot has happened since our last podcast would be an understatement. The wars in Ukraine and the Middle East have gotten larger, then smaller for one, and bigger for the other. Protests here in the US and near you in Los Angeles have turned and remain violent. We still don't have clarity on tariffs, both from a policy and from a legal side. The big, beautiful bill passed, but amidst all that chaos, the financial markets have remained remarkably stable. How do you explain that, Larry?
Well, actually, I think that they've been tremendously volatile. It's just that we've kind of ended up slightly above where we started. I mean, the S&P 500 is up like 7% for the year, but most of that actually happened before Trump was elected in the first 20 days. So what we've really seen is that with all through this is that there's been a lot of volatility. We've just ended up like slightly ahead of where we were. But that's good enough to be an all-time high. And so the media is kind of going crazy saying, oh, yeah, stock market's at an all-time high. But, it really is, there really is a bunch of winners and losers in the stock market. And, we're seeing the tech companies, with a few exceptions, aren't doing as well. We're seeing value companies. We're seeing real assets doing better than financial entities. So the market itself, like put it all together, is like I said, slightly higher. And it seems like it's stable and it seems like it's good. But we're really seeing, I think, is a big transition in where returns are coming from. And I think we're seeing, kind of global value be better. And I also think that we're seeing real assets, hard assets, commodities be a much bigger part of that. And so, me, I'm always not wanting to be fully stock market. In fact, probably invest less in the stock market than any other financial advisor you'll see out there. But the market seems all right. But if you're in the wrong things right now, if you're what did well 2 years ago, you're probably not that happy right now. So it may seem flat and the media may be going a little crazy and pushing the narrative, but the media either has to say, oh, it's wonderful, it's all-time high, or, the world is ending in order to generate, clicks and eyeballs and sell advertising.
Let's talk about this one big, beautiful bill. What's your take?
So, I was on the record as saying that I didn't think that this thing could get done quickly, that it would come down to December, and that, we're all going to be in pins and needles, and that the fiscal hawks in the Republican Party were going to drag it out. And I was just completely wrong. I've said this a number of times that, both in the first administration, now the second administration, Trump's gotten things done that I didn't think would happen, and things have been better than I thought they would be, and results have been better. I've been, very shocked and surprised about that. And this is probably the biggest one of all, that he was able to get this done by July 4th, and I know he went behind closed door with a lot of them. And I don't know how much arm twisting was involved. But my only kind of rational thought behind this is that he talked to the fiscal conservatives and he kind of laid out a couple things. One is if this thing expires and doesn't get done, like everything is going to be worse. We're going to have, the biggest, largest tax increase probably in the history of the country, and that's going to derail the economy. And also, I think he talked about a little bit about on paper, this is supposed to increase the debt over 10 years, $3 trillion. But that's like CBO numbers, right? The Congressional Budget Office. And they kind of work off formulas that don't end up standing up in the real world. And the reality is that every time we've had a substantive cut in taxes, that instead of income to the government going down, it's going up, and substantially up. And the proportion paid by the highest income owners goes up. And I think the reason for that is that they're spending less time with guys like me that do tax strategy work to get the taxes down. If it's easier just to pay them, that was what Stephen Moore, a famous economist who I really believe in, said. If you make it easier to pay the taxes to avoid them, then you're going to have a double effect. One is that people are just going to pay them rather than use elaborate strategies to avoid them, number one. And number two, when they do that, there's more focus on the businesses and where they were generating the money than on the tax strategy. And that causes growth too. So I think that kind of behind closed doors, he made some promises about future budget cuts. They did just do a $9 billion cut in certain areas. They can go back and retroactively cut through a process where you go to the Senate and you have a vote there and say, hey, we want to eliminate payments on these things. And they can, agree on that, and they're gone, even in the current budget. So I think that he kind of took a practical measure that was Trump did and said, hey, look, like I'm going to, this is a first step. This is actually going to maybe not decrease the deficit, but it's definitely going to, slow it down a lot. We needed to do this, and there's other steps that we're going to take. So I think he took a practical approach, and most guys and gals, I guess, in Congress said, okay, like we're going to take your word for it. And he has a lot of power right now because, as he said, he's getting a lot of wins. Now, whether you personally view them as a win or not win is irrelevant. The reality is he's got a lot of he's getting a lot of his policy things done. And, sometimes when someone's popular and they're growing in the polls, you kind of don't want to buck the trend as a politician if you're in that party. Because remember, the issue here wasn't going to be the Democrats. They were all going to vote against it. It was with a 3-vote majority in the House. I believe it's 3 votes, maybe 4 now. There was one, I think, person that had to have a special election. But regardless, that's a very thin majority. In the first Trump term, he couldn't get bills passed with 30, with a 33, I think it was, room to lose 33 Republicans on a vote, and he couldn't get things done. So it was shocking to me, but I think that he got it done, right? You got to give him credit. And I think that and it didn't get watered down a lot, so I think that overall this is an economic positive. And I hope that it delivers good results.
So how does this affect the economy?
Well, that's the thing about it. The economy is like the Titanic, right? It's, and we're kind of are steered towards an iceberg right now. We got a lot of fundamental problems. So this is going to help, but it's not going to solve problems. It's not like you can get rid of the drag of the massive amount of debt that we have on us. The reality is that the economy actually is very difficult for most people right now. Things are not good, right? And whether they were kind of chopping up numbers to say it was good in prior administrations, they're maybe not doing that now. But the reality is I don't think, inflation has slowed. It hasn't, I know last month supposedly it was 0, but it may have slowed, but it hasn't it's not like prices are going down, right? In most things, just the rate of increase has slowed, and the effects of that in the economy are going to be big. And the other thing, and I've mentioned this before, is that part of the GDP numbers is government spending. Well, government spending is going to get cut a lot. So the numbers eventually are going to look worse because the component that was government spending isn't going to be there. Now, if you ask me, I put on my economist hat, I don't think you should view a dollar that comes out of government spending the same as you do coming out of the private sector. I think a private sector job drives a lot of growth, and very times a public sector dollar is going to be a hindrance because of the debt problem. So I don't think that this is all rosy and everything's good. I still have a lot of things that they need to deal with and are going to be tough. And they're doing a lot of things that may be long-term good for the economy, in my opinion, but short-term they're going to be drag, and they're going to be painful, and it's going to cause strife. And so the reality is I think it's really tough for a lot of people right now. And I also think that there's very much a dichotomy in who's dealing with stuff and who's not. If you're in a big city, life is much more difficult for you than if you're in a Midwestern town or you're in a smaller city or something like that. I mean, it just is different, right? Costs in big cities are still going up dramatically, energy and insurance being 2 of them. And the cost of debt is still there, right? One of the things that I've talked about time in the past is that, when they talk about the stock market, you're talking about the public markets, but a lot goes on in the private markets, right? And that's been a bigger and bigger part of the economy over the past couple of decades. And things still aren't moving in the private, the sector, like the venture capital and hedge fund deals out there. I mean, if you're not AI, you're not getting funded. There's a shortage of money. We still had a lot of startups that have gone down the tubes. It's still tough to finance a startup. It's still difficult. And there's very good companies that are doing good work that can't find funding they're needing because it just isn't out there. The amount of capital isn't there. A lot of times because venture capital guys are sitting there going like, all right, I see a good idea, but I've got, X dollars in this other company and they may need a new capital infusion. And if I go put the money in this new company, right, is that better than saving money for the existing companies that may need a bailout because, life is difficult or they haven't been able to execute on their game plan or they have to pivot, right? So used to be they weren't worried about where, money was coming from for their existing deals. Now they are, right? So I think it's a very difficult world out there if you're in the startup space, no matter how good your idea is. I mean, we do some fundraisers for early stage technology companies. And what we're seeing is the bridge early finance rounds that we do are being extended and they're waiting to go after the bigger, venture capital, private equity rounds later because that money isn't there. So which is good for investors actually, if you're in those deals, because the early stage deals are typically more, better than the later stage deals as far as your potential for return, but, not expecting that to happen. I mean, we got guys with signed contracts with the, NFL and NBA and signed deals and revenue and still can't really attract money on good terms.
The numbers look good. At least they appear to. Inflation's down. Growth is still positive. Help me out. What am I missing?
It's kind of what I was talking about before, which is that, the government spending portion of the economy is still there. It's like they tried to roll out and get rid of a lot of that spending, but current year, they really couldn't. That's why the courts kind of set them back and said like, yeah, that's the past budget. You can fix that in a future budget, but you got to still spend it in the past budget, right? So a lot of that spending has the effect of it in the economy hasn't been felt. And like I said, that's kind of like, okay, if we get rid of that government spending, that's going to be a longer term benefit because at the end of the day, the amount of debt that the federal government has, in fact, foreign governments all over the world have, is a big deal. They have to service that debt. But if the pain of that hasn't really come across in the numbers yet, but people are feeling it, right? They're absolutely feeling that because there's a lot of people that are having a lot of difficulty right now, and I don't want to make a judgment on how they were living their lives, but a lot of them, people were doing stuff and were kind of government dependent, right? And a lot of that's starting to get rolled back, both because the federal government's cut back and also because state governments are in extreme financial duress and they can't hand out money like they used to. I live in Sierra Madre, which is, not part of Los Angeles City, but Los Angeles City is cutting, they're billions of dollars in the hole, and they're laying off thousands of city employees right now. You can make a judgment whether those were needed or not, but the people that lose their jobs are still feeling a lot of pain, and they weren't necessarily prepared for it. Because one of the reasons people take government jobs is job stability, right? The idea was always that if you take a government job, you'll have a good retirement pension. You won't make as much money, but you'll have job stability, right? You'll be able to work for a long time, and you can kind of be a career middle bureaucrat and have a pretty good life for yourself. Well, that's out the window when they're laying off thousands of employees, for in a city the size of LA. So, there is a lot of pain out there in a lot of sectors of the economy, and things are not good, and people feel that. And the numbers may say, oh, things are great or things are fine, but doesn't translate to people, in their everyday lives. And like I said, inflation hasn't rolled back. Things are still really expensive. I will say this, I've done a couple trips with my son. We do these 2 baseball trips every year. We go see the Dodgers play at a couple different parks, and then we always go to the All-Star game, right? And so I was in Denver because we saw the Dodgers play the Rockies, and then we were in Kansas City. Obviously much urban, but not LA urban. And things seem to be going, a little bit better there for people than it is in LA. Gas prices were a lot lower. Food prices were a lot lower. Housing prices are a lot lower. Your dollar stretches more there, especially Kansas City, right? And I'm not saying that those cities don't have problems like the homeless. It's not LA homeless, but they have homeless issues there.
They have crime issues for sure.
They have crime issues, yeah. But,
yes.
The average
cost of living, yes. Prices, yes. You've lived in the Midwest. I've lived in the Midwest. It's cheaper than living in New York, LA. I mean, if you want to give the exception to Chicago, which is expensive for the Midwest, but it's still, absolutely compared to San Francisco or, Boston or no, it's not close.
Yeah. I mean, I remember refilling the rental car and it was $3 and change for gas, and it's $5 for change here. That's a big deal, right? You know, food in general is, you know, 50% higher in LA. You go eat out, and I mean, we had in Kansas City, we tried to go do the barbecue, right? There's all these tremendous barbecue places there. One of which is this place called Joe's, and we tried to go to the original Joe's, right? Which is actually a converted gas station, right? Line was way too long. We couldn't get in. So we went to this Italian restaurant right across from it, or, you know, literally just right down the road. And like, oh my God, it was some of the best pizza I have ever had. This place was spectacular. But, you know, the price of the pizza was what you would get. It was cheaper than, a Blaze Pizza is in LA, right? I mean, this was gourmet pizza for a Blaze Pizza price, if not actually cheaper, right? That it was impressive, you know. That's a big difference. I think that it's a little bit easier in these places to live at a little bit higher level and not be as stressed, you know. Because I can tell you in LA, like granted I have teenage drivers, but like my car insurance just seems to go astronomically through the roof. I mean, it's crazy, you know. We're getting close to, you know, where, you know, what you could spend on a mortgage 20 years ago is what you have to pay for car insurance now, right? And don't even talk about homeowners insurance because you can't even get it, right? There's big differences, probably bigger than we've ever had before, depending on where you live, right? But I do notice that, you know, I do have a tendency due to business and networking and stuff to go to a lot of really nice restaurants and places. They seem to be doing great in LA, right? I think that, you know, the upper crust and the elite have the ability to hire guys like me and take advantage of what's going on. And even though there's a lot of economic distress, turn that into income and turn that into dollars in their bottom line, you know, save them money on taxes. So they're okay. But I think it's the middle, lower middle, and working class that are kind of bearing the brunt of a lot of this, right? And I think that's why you see a lot of them kind of rebelling and saying no more. I mean, what you really have started seeing is that, you know, it used to be that the social media tax and all that stuff was strictly, you know, kind of a left-wing type strategy. There wasn't seeing a lot of it on the right. Well, I don't know if it was because if you saw the Superman movie, the Republicans hired more monkeys to be bots. But the right wing is jumped in on that wholeheartedly now. And you don't see this as kind of a one-sided fight in the media and in social media, because we're working a lot on social media strategy ourselves and trying to take advantage and use that. And so what I'm seeing is it's like both sides are both barrels on that right now, which is different than it has been in the past. So saying that, I will say that we also went to Atlanta for the All-Star game. That was spectacular. The first swing off in the history of the All-Star game. That was amazing to be seen. It was a lot of fun. But, you know, Atlanta seems to be doing pretty well. And so I would say that there's also probably geographic. I think the South may be doing better than other parts of the country are right now, because we didn't really see a lot of the big city problems that you're going to see in a Chicago, a St. Louis, and LA, San Francisco, or in New York City, all places that I've been recently.
So you've traveled around, and you had a good, and Pete Alonso of the Mets had a big home run in the All-Star game, and that's a nice trip you do.
Yeah, and he was all ready to come up to be the third bat in the swing off, right? But Kyle Schwarber crushed 3 home runs, and, you know, the National League won, and he didn't get his shot. You could see, like, I had a pretty good view of him from where our seats were. We were kind of along the sideline, deep into right field at the corner. Really good seats to see a baseball game, because you get to interact with the right fielder. You get balls thrown to you. You're still in the portion potentially to get, you know, foul balls and stuff like that. In fact, during warmups for the All-Star game, we weren't paying attention because we didn't think where we were the ball could reach us because of the net. And Aaron Judge hit one that curved around the net and hit my son in the shoulder. We were both in our phones, and all of a sudden they're like, well, and he got tagged right in the shoulder. Nice bruise for it, right? So it's kind of like this. So it was exciting and all that, but at the same time, it's like, all right, the economy curves too, and sometimes things hit where you don't think it's going to hit. And I think we're seeing some of that. So just like an Aaron Judge can curve a foul ball around a net, there's a lot of other things that get curved right now. And, we are living in interesting times. And I think, people need to be really proactive in what they're doing financially right now. We're not in one of those periods where you can throw, throw a dart at a board and hit a stock and do well. We're seeing real transition to what's going to perform in the markets, what's not. I think we're really seeing a tilt towards global value, towards hard assets, towards real estate, durable income type stuff. And while, there's still some great technology plays out there, the Magnificent Seven hasn't been very magnificent this year.
Well, you certainly have had some good travels as of late, and we will stay tuned to see what happens with the economy going forward. So that's going to be a wrap for the Financial Architects podcast. I want to thank Larry Steinberg, partner and chief investment officer at Financial Architects, and I am Evan Makovsky, and we will see you on the next episode.